welcome to Great British Ghosts. Today we're in the West Midlands. Later on I'll be visiting a haunted moated manor house in West Bromwich. But first of all, I'm at the famous Four Crosses Inn in Cannock. Now when this was built 400 years ago, it was a quiet little village. Well, as you can hear, things have changed a bit since then.
The Four Crosses is a 17th century coaching inn built with reclaimed ship's timbers. It's situated on a busy main road, which dates back to Roman times and has had dozens of reports of ghostly apparitions, poltergeists and other phenomena over the years. Chris Arnold, a local paranormal investigator, agreed to take me on a tour.
OK, Michaela, welcome to the Four Crosses in Cannock. This is a 17th century coaching inn built in 1636. Coaching inns were very important that day and age. Our modern day equivalent is motorway services. So it's where coaches would have stopped, the horses would have been fed and watered, the driver might have had a pint of ale to sustain him on his journey, and then they'd have been off again. It's not a famously haunted building, but we've been investigating it for years. We think it's a bit of a hidden gem in the paranormal world, and we think it's an important part of haunted Britain. But to start the tour, I'm going to take you into a strange place to begin, the ladies' loos.
OK.
OK. Would you like to follow me? As you can see, I'm bringing you into the cubicle. Strange story from a few years ago, about 5 years ago. The landlady opened up first thing in the morning, came into the toilets to check everything was OK, and found two crossed carnations on the toilet seat. Now, there were carnations in the window, but there were two crossed carnations. She thought it a little bit strange, but didn't think too much of it. Went out into the bar area, was doing something behind the bar, looked back at the toilet door, where she just walked through. A big, heavy candelabra that's usually by the fireplace was now stood right in the middle of the doorway. She couldn't have possibly missed it coming out of the toilets because she'd have walked straight into it. And it did shake her up a bit because it's pretty much unexplained. The other thing in here, if you excuse me, just a second. Women have been sat in here, obviously, and have often reported hearing the sound of children crying, muttering, just very faint sound. But enough women have have heard this to make me think that there might be something in it.
Flamboyant local psychic Mystic Ed Ward is very familiar with the ghosts of the Four Crosses and agreed to come down and tell me about them.
I've had many experiences here at the Four Crosses. They're not nasty experiences either. For people that come here and think, oh, you know, I've gone into the ladies' toilet and I've heard banging of doors and things, don't be afraid by it. In fact, it's quite romantic. You hear things on the stairs, you hear things about dogs, and you can feel cold drafts around you as well. But they're spirits that don't do any harm.
OK, Michaela, this is the snug area of the bar. In here, as in, I think, pretty much every haunted pub that I've ever been to, the story is always the same, that behind the bar, people have seen glasses flying off the shelves.
So not just falling off, actually flying?
No, actually flying off, and glasses moving about the bar by themselves. Just kind of typical poltergeist activity, we would call it. I'm going to take you up into the main bar area now. Now this area just hasn't changed in hundreds of years. Behind me, if you look here, you can just about see the outline of what was the main entrance to the Four Crosses. Now, as you can see, it backs out onto the main road, and quite a few deaths have occurred over the years because people have had a bit too much to drink, staggered out through the main entrance, not looked whether there was any traffic coming, and have actually been killed. Tragically, there was a child in the 1980s who was also killed that way.
So that's why they've walled the whole thing out?
That's why they've blocked it up, and why we now enter the pub through the other side. One of the more persuasive stories that I've heard in here goes back about 10 years. Over in this area, there was a member of staff just clearing up during the day. She looked up to see a teenage girl dressed in very ragged clothing, barefoot, just standing staring at her. They looked at each other for a few seconds, and then the girl very calmly turned round and just walked through this wall and disappeared.
What did the member of staff do?
The member of staff promptly quit her job.
Really?
It hasn't returned since.
Freaked her out
Yes,
completely.
I can't say I blame her.
I must say, it's one thing seeing glasses fly off walls, but to see actual apparitions walk through a wall is quite scary, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the holy grail for any paranormal investigator like myself, is to see that full body apparition. Unfortunately, it's a very rare occurrence, and I'm still waiting myself. Also in this area, people have heard footsteps running up and down as if it's coming from the floor above. They've gone up to investigate. There's no one been there. Very strange.
And a lot of people have heard that?
A lot of people have heard that, yeah.
What's upstairs then?
Well, I will show you if you'd like to follow me.
So it's quite an active pub. Quite a lot going on.
It's certainly active, we think. So, it's just through here.
There's a story when we first moved in, the chap from the brewery, Marston's, he was looking at some of the bed and breakfast upstairs, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And he wanted to go into some of the rooms, and he actually tried the door on room number 3, was it?
Yeah, room.
And he heard a lady's voice saying, "Just a minute." And he come down and spoke to Jodie. He said, "There's somebody in room number 3." And she goes, there's nobody in there, there's nobody stopping over. So she took the key up to him and he opened the door, and there was nobody in the room. But there was actually him and a contractor, wasn't there?
Contracts manager, yeah.
And they both heard the voice say, "Just a minute." So,
How did he react to that?
well, he said his face was
They were
like...
very shocked. He was like, I can't believe that. Yeah, they couldn't believe it.
For somebody to knock on door room number 3 and they open the door, they hear a voice, and then there's nobody there, that is the time when you have to remember that we have a sense of humour on the physical plane, and so do spirit. When I've passed over into the spirit world, I'm not losing my sense of humour. I shall come back and make everybody laugh. I shall stand at the end of the bed and go, "Yoo-hoo!" And that's what spirit do.
So I'm going to take you up into the attic. While we were coming up here with a group of members of the public a few years ago, the whole group heard someone call out, "Who's there?" We don't know who said that. There was no one else in the building. It remains another unexplained voice. But in the attic area, story goes that this is where prisoners would have been kept. So when the coaches came in carrying prisoners, they obviously needed to keep them in a secure environment, and they housed them up here. And this might explain some of the voices that have been heard, some of the activity. Obviously, prisoners would have been in a tormented state of mind. If we go back to the stone tape theory, maybe that emotion was kind of soaked up by the beams. No one knows, but these are all theories that possibly might fit.
And of course, no proof, but some of those prisoners could have died up here.
Exactly, no proof at all, but, you know, if that was true, then it's more than likely.
We were sat down here the other night, wasn't we, when we'd finished a few nights ago, and we'd done all the cleaning. That was sitting by the fire, and it was like somebody was running up and down the landing upstairs, but there was no one up there. So that was
hear the footsteps of them running and things.
Yeah, like them running up and down, were they?
So how do you feel now about being landlord and landlady of a haunted pub?
I think if we listened to everything that we heard, I don't think I'd stay here, to be honest. But because I think if I was to see something myself, I think I'd be like, oh my God. But up until now, I'm trying not to let it bother me too much, else I'd be really worried.
The Four Crosses, in my mind, is one of the most haunted inns that I've ever been in. It really is, without a doubt. The things that people have said to others have happened to me. Dogs, children on the stairs, things happening in the ladies' bath, toilets, you name it, things happening in the bar, noises in the middle of the night. It is not unreal, it is very real and not to be feared.
So the Four Crosses Inn looks fairly normal from the outside, but go inside, hear about the hauntings, the history, add a touch of flamboyance, and you get some great ghost stories. This is the Manor House in West Bromwich. It's a fantastic looking Grade 1 listed timber-beamed building dating back to the 13th century. So, surprise, surprise, it has some great British ghosts.
The Manor House is a magnificent building which is surrounded by the residential estates of West Bromwich that have grown up around it over the years. Despite its grandeur, the manor remained derelict for decades before being saved by Sandwell Council, who run it today. The building's manager, Rachel Smith, agreed to show me around.
Let me show you the Great Hall.
Oh, wow, look at this. This really is a great hall. It's fabulous. When does this date back to?
The Great Hall dates from 1270.
So it's really old.
Really old.
What about those timbers? Are those originals?
Yes, the timbers in the roof are original.
So what would this hall have been used for?
It would have been one of the main rooms in the house. It would have been used for feasting, as well as local courts, and as well as for local landowners to come and pay their taxes.
So it's a real living room. People really lived here.
Yes.
Have you got any great ghost stories in this room? I would imagine you have.
Yes, quite a few things have happened in this room. In the middle of the room here, there used to be a doorway. When it was renovated, it was taken out, but people have seen a medieval dressed man walking in and out as if there is still a doorway there, and he's looked them full on in the face.
So a full apparition?
Yes.
That must be pretty spooky.
Yes, I should imagine it would be. One of the ghosts of the Manor House is reputed to be a cat, and we've had a lot of experiences in this room when people have been sitting at meetings and things where a cat has brushed past their legs.
Have you ever experienced the cat yourself?
I haven't experienced the cat, but I'm quite grateful I haven't, to be honest.
Have you ever experienced anything?
I've heard footsteps from the South Solar up here. It's very common for us to be sitting here or working here and hearing footsteps and creaking floorboards, but now I think I should show you the North Solar.
We've had quite a few experiences here, and it's one of the few places that I would go as far as saying I think is actually haunted. We had one night here, we were just doing a private investigation, and we were sat in a small room just near to what used to be the bar. The group was sat in there. They heard very distinctly footsteps. It sounded like it was on concrete, and the footsteps walked up to where they were sat, and then they all heard a very loud sigh. It scared them all, obviously. The interesting thing was, and we did actually record this sound, the bar was actually carpeted at the time, but the footsteps sounded like they were on concrete, so that was particularly interesting.
So what was this room, Rachel?
This would have been a solar, which is a private living area for the family, perhaps after they retired after feasting in the Great Hall. It's also got a chapel attached to it, so it would have been an area where they could have felt a priest would be praying for them.
So any great stories in here?
There is a few ghost stories in here. One of them is that people have seen apparitions of young men. There is actually quite a murderous story that goes hand in hand in historical records for the Manor House, and that is of two brothers in the 14th century, Bertram and Nicholas, who had been to a local lady who was known as Agnes the Weaver, and they'd been to visit her, and on the way home they'd had a dispute of some kind, and Bertram actually murdered his elder brother Nicholas here at the Manor House, just outside the Manor House. There's also a story associated with the chapel. The chapel area, there are dowels across here, which shows that we would have had curtains hung across to hide the chapel from the solar. It's believed that when the curtains were drawn, when it was a pub, the gentleman whose job it was would draw the curtains in the evening, and the next morning he would come up, and every morning they were back open.
Really?
Yes.
And have any apparitions been seen around this area?
I do believe outside the chapel area, outside in the grounds, there has actually been a monk-like figure.
And do people actually see the whole figure then?
Yes.
Regularly?
Yes, yes. I mean, up until as recently as a few weeks ago, staff have heard noises, seen things. We've had people who've worked here at events who've actually come to me and said, oh, I've just seen an apparition, and have actually gone white and been quite scared. So, yeah, pretty haunting stuff.
So you'd say the Manor House is definitely haunted?
Definitely haunted.
It's got a lot of good stories.
I just want to tell you up here, something quite odd happened in these ladies' toilets.
It often seems to happen in the ladies' toilets. So these obviously aren't historical toilets.
No, they're not historical toilets. These are 60s toilets. You can tell by the colour. About 12 months ago, we were taking some photos for our Halloween events, trying to make them look a bit spooky.
What, looking in the mirror?
Yes, trying to make it look like I was a reflection hiding me behind the door. When we actually got the photos back, there was actually something behind me.
So there was a shadow behind you in the photos?
Yes.
That is so bizarre. So you didn't have to Photoshop it?
No, it's quite scary.
And no idea what that shadow was?
No, not at all.
There was one public event we did here, which was probably the most active night we've ever had. All night things were happening. We had disembodied footsteps. We had doors opening and closing by themselves. People actually saw the apparition of what they said was a monk kind of fleeing across the Great Hall. And this was witnessed by more than one person, which obviously is more convincing as a story. At one point we got all the groups together because it sounded like someone was trying to break in. It sounded like someone was throwing themselves against the exterior doors. We checked, there was absolutely no one in the vicinity at all, and that remains unexplained.
One of the manor's guides, Bethany Smith, got more than she bargained for one day during a tour of the kitchen.
I was standing here and I felt something as if like it was grabbing my shoulders. So I thought maybe it's a draft coming from the windows. So from this side I moved to over here and I was standing over in that area and I felt something as if like it had got harder.
What's that, actually pushing
like,
down on your shoulders?
Grabbing my shoulders, yes. So I decided to move a little bit further to try and get away from it because it did actually quite scare me. And I saw a manly shadow over there standing by the door as if it was going up to the panelled room or coming from the panelled room.
And what did this manly shadow look like?
It was just as if like it was a blur, black blur.
And did it go then? Did it quickly
went,
vanish?
and then after that I had to leave the room because it did actually quite scare me and I had to go back into the Great Hall and join everybody else.
So how do you feel in the Manor House now?
I do not like going in this part of the area of the house. If I have to go in this part of the area to turn lights on or take tour groups around here, I actually have to have people with me because I don't like being on my own.
And Beth, do you have any idea what that could have been, particularly the pushing down?
Well, I don't feel like it. If it is a spirit, I don't feel like it's a bad spirit. Maybe it's just a spirit letting me know the presence of the house, but it does scare me, but I don't think it's a bad spirit or anything bad.
When the lights are off, when you're perhaps by yourself, it does take on a bit of an oppressive atmosphere. I certainly wouldn't be hanging around too long by myself at night, but that doesn't detract from the fact that I think it's a wonderful part of England's haunted heritage.
Well, the Manor House really does have some great ghost stories, but what's fascinating about this place is that it's right in the middle of a residential area. It truly is a haunted hidden gem. See you next time. Bye-bye.
A must-watch Great British Ghosts continues with 2 brand new and exclusive episodes this Friday night from 9. Up next, the Antiques Roadshow.